Hello again, and welcome to the 310th edition of Forum for a Better Understanding. It's been a privilege over these 6 years to share with you weekly an important interfaith issue. But in my time, I don't think there's been a more important topic or a matter to discuss with you than the situation of Christianity in the Middle East. It's not only because we've just celebrated the birth of our Lord and that Palestine and Israel, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, they've been on our minds in all our Christmas cards and all of our happy thoughts about Jesus' birth. But for 2,000 years, it has been a difficult row to hoe in that part of the world for the church. And today we have two special guests who are going to share with us their own experience, their own faith, their own insights into what was recently held at the Vatican. A special synod was called by His Holiness to discuss the situation of the church in the Middle East. These important people met for 2 weeks in October of 2010, and we have Brother Donald Mansir, who is a brother of the Christian schools, currently director of the St. Mary's College Brothers community in Moraga. But he has also spent 6 years in Jerusalem and is just back for this program, having spent a good month there, and is going back again for some more months of study and work with the Bethlehem University students. We want to thank Brother Donald for being here to share his depth of experience and insights into this part of the world and this part of our faith. To his side is our good friend Deacon Mark Shirin, who is a deacon at Holy Trinity Armenian Apostolic Church here in Fresno, is a underwriter of one of our programs, Our Vision for the Future here at KNXT, and someone also passionately interested in the Middle East, where he also studied as an Armenian deacon. Thank you for being here. And I wonder if we could begin with a simple question. Why would both of you want to share around this topic of Christianity in the Middle East? Broad strokes, Brother Donald, why are you so committed to this that you've gone back many, many times? You've lived in Jerusalem. You are committed to this. What keeps you so interested?
I suppose primarily my interest is similar to Pope Benedict's, who when he convoked the Synod, said that it was out of an anxiety for the churches in the Middle East. And he means by that the living church. And having lived and worked and taught in that part of the world since the late 80s, I get more and more anxious, and I have an anxiety about the people who are living there. And it would be terribly unfortunate if where Jesus was born, walked, spent his life, was educated, died, and rose, that we're no longer able to have people who are Christians who are committed to that living there. So I share in that anxiety, and so I want to share that with others and see what we might be able to do for the people who are living there.
Thank you, Donald. Mark, how far back does your experience go with living in the Middle East and your commitment to Christianity in that part of the world?
The first time I traveled to the Middle East was to Jerusalem in 1972. And then during the mid-'70s, I was a student in Lebanon, in the Armenian Apostolic Monastery in Antilias, Lebanon. And at that time, the civil war in Lebanon had begun, and so I've lived in some very difficult times. And we have a large Armenian community in the Middle East, in many cities in the Middle East, and I've always been interested in that area. That's the cradle of Christianity. Both Lebanon and Israel, or the Holy Lands of Israel, are biblical lands, and the same problems that Catholic Christians are experiencing in the Middle East are also problems that Armenian Christians and Assyrian Christians and all other denominations are experiencing as a result of this conflict between Christianity and Islam.
Evidently, the Pope saw this as a major, major need in the Church to address this at a synod. He was invited by others who lived there, who put it on his radar, but sure enough, he did call a meeting. Let's see the clip from Religion and Ethics that introduces us to the importance of this synod held in Rome, October 10th to the 24th.
Pope Benedict XVI welcomed nearly 200 Catholic bishops to the Vatican for a 2-week synod on the state of Christianity in the Middle East. The main focus of the conference is the exodus of Christians from the area. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the war in Iraq are said to have caused most of the emigration. The bishops are also discussing the state of religious freedom in predominantly Muslim countries.
That was only 30 seconds, but it was on a program we call Religion and Ethics, which does give us basically what's going on in the world of religion. Now, I wonder if either one of you would help me out on this. Pope Paul VI was the Pope who, in our memory, reinstituted this idea of having a synod to be able to discuss regional, topical issues with hierarchs from certain parts of the world. Usually it takes 2 or 3 years to even schedule one of these things. But it was only 13 months before the meeting that he suddenly made this a major commitment. And I wonder if both of you would address the urgency of this compared to just being another important meeting, which every meeting is theoretically important. Why is this one overridingly important? Donald.
I couldn't possibly speak for the Pope, but in these days there is a great deal of attention on conflict between Islam and Christianity, or between Muslims and Christians, Muslim states, since 9/11 in particular. With the so-called end of the Cold War, there is now the perceived threat of Islam. And there's some reason for that concern. There's a political aspect of Islam that can be very dangerous, and we've seen it with the killings of clergy and Christians in churches in Turkey, in Iraq. There's a terrible concern about the Christian communities in those countries. The emigration, the 50-60% of the Christian community having fled in the last 60 years from those areas is a great deal of concern. So with recent political situations in that part of the world, with the emigration, the Pope has seen an urgency to begin a conversation for 2 reasons, it seems to me. Have a better conversation between Christians and Muslims, and Christians means all of the Christian denominations, not just the Catholic, and that Christians who are living in those countries begin to see themselves as real witnesses, and that they have an integrity about their life. And so there are 2 aspects to it, that the Christians come together, all the denominations, be authentic witnesses, and to engage primarily with the Muslims who are living in that part of the world, to some extent the Jews, because of the political ramifications of those conversations.
Mark, do you see it the way the Pope does? Is the Armenian community as glad that there was this meeting to address this issue, or is he going with a Catholic direction only?
No, we're very, very encouraged by the Synod. In fact, the Armenian Church sent 2 delegates, the primate of Aleppo, Syria, and also the primate of Damascus. They were active participants in the Synod, and His Holiness Aram I, our Catholicos, who resides in Lebanon, sent a letter to the Synod accepting the invitation to send delegates, and feels very important. And his concerns are, the Pope's concerns were echoed by His Holiness when he sent his message to the Synod. He's a proponent of Muslim Christian dialogue. Not just on a theoretical basis, but on an active basis. And he also believes, like the Pope, that it doesn't end with the Synod, when the Synod ended in October, but the follow-through and activating the communities to follow there was 44 recommendations made by the Synod, which I think we'll talk about later on. But some of those recommendations were to actively dialogue with the Islam community and Christian leaders, not just the clergy, but the whole communities and denominations should work together, because there's common cultural similarities between Muslims and Christians in the Middle East. In fact, there may be more similarities between a Christian Arab and a Muslim Arab, as opposed to their Christian brothers in the West. So there's a commonality among the peoples of the Middle East, and we should focus on that as opposed to the areas where we part company.
One thing about a meeting, and it happens whether it's a small little thing or the Vatican Council, you need to have clear goals and objectives. Those convened should know what is the parameter of our discussions and our efforts. Donald, very clearly, again, could you remind us of the way the Pope presented the two main goals? Succinctly, what would they be so that all the participants were on board?
Well, yes, he articulated two particular aims. The first is to confirm and strengthen the identity of the Christian community living in the Middle East. That's to say that the heads of the Catholic Church and those who were there as participants were there to strengthen the identity of the Christian community living in that part, to know that there's support for them, not as museums and churches and shrines to visit, but there's a living community there. So to support and strengthen their identity. And an aspect of that is how do we do that? And we might talk about that later. The second aim is that to deepen the ecclesial communion among the different Christian denominations that are there. That at Pentecost, we're one Christian community. By the 5th century, we're divided up into various communities for a number of reasons, and we keep trying to work through that. So one of the efforts of the Synod is to encourage the different denominations to deepen the conversation that they've been having, the ecumenism that's been going on, so that they may see that we're one. So it seems to me that those were the two aims, and to do it in the face of the Muslim, Jewish, and non-believing communities.
Believe it or not, we've already reached the halfway point in our first discussion. We'll be back in a minute, so don't go anywhere. Stay tuned for part 2 of our discussion on the Church in the Middle East.
KNXT thanks all its loyal viewers and respected businesses who have supported your Catholic television station. Now you can support KNXT with program underwriting by having your name, your company's name, or organization associated with your favorite program. Detailed information about you or your company will appear before and after each program or day part you select. Keep the quality and spiritual message alive and make a difference. Call 559-488-7440 today or go online at knxt.tv to find out more about program underwriting on KNXT.
Welcome back to our discussion of the situation of the Church in the Middle East. Brother Donald Mansir and Deacon Mark Shirin are sharing with us from their own experience, their own knowledge, and their own faith, the importance of this meeting that was held in Rome in October 2010. The question I'd like to ask our two participants today, with all those hierarchs who were present, and I saw a list that said there were about 330 participants, 177 synodal fathers, 70 priests from other traditions, 72 archbishops, 67 bishops, 69 what they call collaborators, 19 cardinals, including Cardinal Mahoney, 9 patriarchs, 13 from other Christian churches, Sunni and Shia representatives, and Rabbi David Rosen, an assemblage of the world church community and interfaith community of the Middle East. How would you like to review for us, Brother Donald, some of these people that you know we have pictures of and their significance at being invited by His Holiness to participate?
Well, again, one of the two aims that His Holiness had for convening the Synod was to deepen the ecclesial communion among the particular churches. There are 7 Catholic churches in the Middle East. Most of us think there's the Roman Catholic Church, and that's the Catholic Church. But the Catholic Church, there's the Coptic Catholic, the Greek Catholic, the Syrian Catholic, the Maronite, etc. There are also those Orthodox churches, the Greek Orthodox Church, Armenian Apostolic Church, and unfortunately, Christianity has become divided. But in an attempt to address the division and to bring about reconciliation and really unity among the Christian community, His Holiness Pope Benedict has invited the Chaldean Church, Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, the Armenian Apostolic Church, the Coptics, and the rest of the Christian communities to collaborate in this very important issue of the life of the Christian, the living Christian community in the Middle East. So I think it's an effort of ecumenism.
Besides these members who were present, there is also the idea that they represented traditions that go back in time as old as the Roman Catholic. What would you say would be the main theological issue that they knew they definitely were needing to deal with, even beyond the political? Because the Pope had made it clear in his own presentation he wanted it to be pastoral, not political. Did he succeed in that effort? And what was the reigning ecclesiology that was being discussed by the Synod Fathers?
Well, I'm not sure that there was a reigning or a consensus. The issue was not a priority. I think what was a priority was that all participants were full participants, that the Greek Orthodox community, which has a large membership in the Middle East, that the Coptic community, which has an even larger community, 3 million Copts in Egypt, that they need to be represented if you're going to have a legitimate, honest conversation about the life of the Christians. So regardless theological or political, and I think they're mostly governance conflicts or areas of issues of concern among the various denominations in the Middle East, it was an effort to show that the Roman Catholic Church, that the Pope is saying we're all equal participants in this. We must be. If we're going to demonstrate to the Muslim community, which is 90+% of the population, and to a very small Jewish community, that we believe in our faith, that we are Christians. Muslims, and you know better than I, culturally, if Christians don't seem committed to their faith, and they're not participating, and the heads of the Christian churches are not somehow in harmony, the Muslim community would look and say, well, who wants to believe in this? There's such chaos, and you clearly don't believe in what you're doing. So I think in an effort to demonstrate that we are together as Christians, see how they love one another, that was much more of a priority than any of the differences that we might still be grappling with theologically or in terms of governance.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that totally. In fact, in His Holiness Aram I's letter to the Synod, he said that the Christian community should support the Middle East Council of Churches, a very important organization which he's a part of, because we have to show unity in our Christian beliefs in order to be able to deal with all the challenges and problems that we have dealing with other faiths. So there has to be a commonality between the Christian denominations that work and in the Middle East.
One thing we could do maybe is look at some of these personalities that will be maybe to be put on the screen again, and if Brother Donald can remind us who we're watching and their significance. I think there's certain patriarchs that we want to look at, and then there may be certain people that we're also wanting to talk about. What would be the first picture would be, I think, the Greek Patriarch of Jerusalem.
Yes, His Beatitude Theophilus, who is the current Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, and his community is, if it's not the largest, it's parity with the Latin Catholic Church in the Holy Land. Some would say that he is the elder to the Latin Patriarch because of their traditions. Unfortunately, there has been such tension between the Greek Orthodox and the Latin Catholics for centuries, and not just for theological reasons, that any effort to bring them together would be wonderful. You've had Corky Normart on the show before, who helped with the decoration of the interior of the dome of the Holy Sepulchre, which could only happen because the Greek Orthodox and the Latin Catholics and the Armenians agreed to do so. So it's important to invite the Greek Orthodox Patriarch, who was happy to have participants at the Synod, to have a conversation about the presence of the Christian community in a very difficult part of the world.
Now, the second picture might be something Mark could address, is the Armenian Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, and remind us about Turkum Mangugian.
It's Turkum II Manugyan. He's been the patriarch for over 20 years. He's in his early 90s now and suffering from some health issues. But the Armenians are one of the, according to the status quo, which is the agreement that was forged during the Ottoman Empire during those times, where the three communities, the Armenian Orthodox, the Roman Catholic, and the Greek Orthodox, have custody of the holy shrines in Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and we're one of the main custodians. And Armenians trace their roots back to the year 600, when the Patriarchate was established. So, unfortunately, there's very few Armenians still living in Jerusalem and Bethlehem. But we have a monastic order there, the St. James Monastery, and we have a brotherhood there.
The third picture is obviously a very distinguished cardinal from Tehran. Could you tell us a little bit, Brother Donald, about his the Patriarch of Babylon of the Chaldeans and the Chaldean Catholic Church?
Yes, in Iraq, Baghdad, Iraq. The Chaldean is the Catholic community in that part of the world, which has its own distinct rites and rituals, liturgy, and the rest of it. The Chaldeans were, until the invasion by the United States and its allies into Iraq, the largest Christian community in Iraq, and unfortunately who have suffered terribly. There are other Christian communities there as well, but the Chaldeans had been the largest community of Catholics. One
thing that people may have heard but not quite understood is that Tariq Aziz, who was the second under Saddam Hussein, happened to be very faithfully a Chaldean Christian.
Melkite.
I think it was Melkite.
Clarify the distinction then.
The Chaldeans are Assyrian by race and origin. The Melkites, which I think Tariq Aziz is, he has that confession, is the Greek Orthodox. It's the Arabized Greek Orthodox, if you will.
So what's so interesting is to know that in the Middle East it is very complicated.
Greek Catholic.
I'm
sorry,
Greek
Catholic. Sorry.
Very important that we also locate people not in Iran but in Iraq, because we're going to be talking later on definitely about the church in Iraq when we will be showing how the violence there, since, as Brother Donald said, the invasion, has further exacerbated an already tenuous connection. They're warning us that we only have a few minutes for this part of the program. We do have another program next week that we'll be visiting with you again to pick up where we left off. Any final thoughts about the part of the program that we wanted to do, part one, laying out the basic direction of our synod that we concluded in October? Brother Donald, final thoughts?
I guess my final thought about the issues for this show is that our listeners begin to realize two things. One, it's very complicated in that part of the world. Be very careful about what you read in the media, what you're told, because it is so complicated. And the other is that the efforts that are going on all around the globe, but in particularly in the Middle East, to bring Christians together, is an extremely important effort, and we're delighted that the Pope has done this.
We will be back next week to continue where we left off, so please stay tuned for another program and join us next week. God bless.